October 14th, 1984. Daniel Cross and Emily Hale walked into a roadside diner just after midnight. They ordered coffee. They laughed. They were seen through the glass, one last time. For 40 years, the case haunted Austin, Texas. No bodies, no answers, just whispers of corruption and a diner that stood like a tomb. But when that car resurfaced, so did the truth. Subscribe for more true crime stories that uncover the darkness buried in plain sight. The clock above the counter ticked toward 2:07 a.m. The Silver Star Diner sat alone on the stretch of Highway 281, its neon sign humming in the humid Texas night. The hum carried into the parking lot, mixing with the buzz of cicadas and the faint rattle of an 18-wheeler passing in the distance. Inside, the air smelled of old coffee, bacon grease, and lemon cleaner. The booths were mostly empty, just a trucker nursing his refill, the night waitress polishing silverware, and the couple in booth 6. They were young, mid-20s maybe. The man had a warm laugh, the kind that carried across the room, and the woman leaned in every time he spoke as though she feared missing a word. They ate pancakes and hash browns, their plates half finished, their coffee cups steaming. The waitress, Ruby, remembered later that they seemed happy. She thought it strange, because most people who came in after midnight were either angry from the road, drunk from the bars, or too tired to care. But these two, she remembered the way their hands touched across the table, as though they were stealing moments. At 2:18 a.m., Ruby brought them fresh coffee. At 2:21 a.m., the man asked where the restroom was. The woman followed him, laughing that she might as well go too. Ruby watched them disappear down the narrow hallway at the back of the diner. At 2:29 a.m., Ruby realized she hadn't seen them return. She checked the hallway. The restrooms were empty. The back door was closed, its chain still in place. By 2:35 a.m., Ruby stood frozen in the kitchen, staring at the untouched plates and the couple's car keys left on the table. She remembered her heart hammering in her chest. She remembered the quiet of the diner growing unbearable, and she remembered one thought circling in her mind. They never left through the front door. Decades later, that booth is still spoken about in hushed tones. People call it the Midnight Special. Two young lovers vanished into the night, leaving behind nothing but half-eaten pancakes and a mystery that won't stay buried. Austin, Texas, present day. The file was heavier than she expected. Detective Claire Ramirez balanced it in her hands, the folder edges frayed, stuffed with decades of yellowing reports, black and white photographs, and brittle newspaper clippings. The cover bore a faded label, case number 84-1127. Silver Star Diner, Disappearance of Daniel Cross and Emily Hale. October 13th, 1984. She'd seen hundreds of cold case files in her career, but this one carried a different kind of weight. Not just paperweight, but history, memory, fear. Why this one? Her partner, Detective Marcus Reed, asked from his desk across the bullpen. He was younger than Claire, still believing in neat resolutions, in justice wrapped up with a bow. He eyed the file like it was a burden she didn't need. Claire didn't answer immediately. She opened the folder, letting the scent of old paper rise. The first report was Ruby's statement, the waitress who had been working that night. Claire read it again, though she already knew it by heart. They came in just after 2. They were laughing. They ordered pancakes. They went to the restroom. They never came back. She tapped her finger against the page, because it doesn't make sense. Marcus leaned back in his chair. A lot of cold cases don't. Not like this. Claire flipped to the photographs. A grainy shot of the diner exterior. Another of the empty booth. The half-eaten food still on the plates. A close-up of the car keys, one key fob decorated with a plastic rainbow charm. No sign of struggle, Marcus said, reading over her shoulder. No. Claire's voice was flat. No forced exit, no blood, no prints except their own, and yet they're gone. Marcus sighed. You think you'll find something the original detectives missed? Not missed, Claire said, closing the folder carefully. Buried. The case had haunted her since she was a teenager when she first heard the story whispered at a slumber party. The midnight special, the couple who vanished between bites of pancakes. It had sounded like a ghost story then, something told to spook kids, but it wasn't a story. It was real. And now, 40 years later, the file was sitting on her desk. That evening, Claire drove out to the diner's old location. The Silver Star had been shut down since the late 1990s, a casualty of interstate expansion. The building still stood, boarded windows tagged with graffiti, weeds clawing up through the parking lot. She parked on the cracked asphalt and sat for a moment, engine off, silence pressing in. The neon sign was long gone, but in her mind she could see it flickering, painting the night in red and blue light. Inside, the diner smelled of dust and mold. Claire's flashlight cut through the dark, revealing overturned chairs, a counter with stools still bolted down, and the rows of booths. Booth 6. She stopped when she reached it, her breath tight in her chest. The vinyl seat was torn, the table scarred with carvings from bored customers decades ago. She ran her fingers over the table edge. Ruby's description replayed in her mind. The laughter, the coffee, the couple walking toward the restrooms. Claire turned slowly, scanning the hallway. The restrooms were still there, doors rotted, hinges rusted. The back door was chained shut, just as the report had said. So where had they gone? By the time she returned to Austin, the city lights flickering against her windshield, she already knew she wouldn't sleep. Instead, she spread the file across her dining table, pouring coffee strong enough to keep her anchored. She reread the statements. Ruby's was consistent, unwavering across multiple interviews. The trucker, Howard Dent, had also been questioned. He swore he'd spoken with the couple briefly before they vanished. He even remembered the man mentioning a road trip to Dallas. But beyond that, the trail went cold. No bodies, no car found abandoned, no credit card use, no suspects ever charged. It was as though Daniel Cross and Emily Hale had stepped into a hallway and simply dissolved into air. Claire leaned back, closing her eyes. She let her mind drift to what wasn't in the file, what wasn't said. Ruby had mentioned seeing a second man in the diner briefly that night, a shadow near the jukebox. She couldn't describe him well, just dark hair, a denim jacket, gone by the time she'd looked again. The detail had been brushed off in the original investigation, but to Claire, it felt like a thread. She opened her laptop and typed, Silver Star Diner Disappearance 1984. Dozens of old articles popped up, most rehashing the same details, but one headline caught her eye. Local man claims he saw couple leave diner alive. Published 1992 in a small town paper out of Wimberley. She clicked. The article was short, quoting a man named Arthur Bell, who said he'd been driving past the diner that night and saw the couple walking across the lot toward a dark-colored pickup truck. Police had dismissed it as unreliable, citing inconsistencies in his timeline. But Claire felt her pulse quicken. A truck. Not their car. A truck. At midnight, Claire closed her laptop and sat in silence. The city outside was restless. Sirens in the distance, a dog barking, a car stereo thumping bass. But inside her apartment, the quiet felt heavy. She glanced at the photo of the couple again. Daniel's easy grin. Emily's soft smile. They had no idea the world was about to close around them. Somewhere, the truth was buried. And Claire knew she was already too deep to stop. Morning came gray and cool, the kind of weather that made Austin feel older than it was. Detective Claire Ramirez parked her sedan in front of the records division, a concrete slab of a building where forgotten paper lived. She signed in at the desk, flashed her badge, and was led down into the archives. The smell hit her first. Cardboard, dust, ink. A librarian wheeled out 3 boxes marked 1984 Cold Case Overflow. "You'll want Box C," he said without looking at her. "That's where they dumped all the diner files after the department purged in '95. Be careful, most of it hasn't been handled in years." Claire pulled on gloves. She wasn't worried about evidence contamination. The forensic window had closed decades ago, but about the paper itself. These were fragile lives pressed into pages. Inside Box C, she found the detritus of the investigation: restaurant receipts, payroll ledgers, interview transcripts typed on onion skin paper, Polaroids with curling edges. She laid them out on the metal table one by one. The restaurant's blueprints caught her eye. A set of photocopies showing the diner's layout: the kitchen, the booths, the narrow hallway to the restrooms, and the back door chained at night. She traced the line with her finger. A hallway, a door. No hidden exit, no crawl space. Just 2 restrooms and a dead end, unless the blueprints were incomplete. Claire felt the itch of something unsaid. By noon, she was at the county courthouse, where building permits were kept. The clerk, a woman with tired eyes behind smudged glasses, dug out a faded roll of microfilm. "Silver Star Diner, opened in 1962, the clerk muttered, scanning. "Here we go. Original permit, expansion in 1978. Claire leaned closer as the clerk cranked the machine, projecting grainy images onto the screen. There it was, a note scrawled in the margin of the 1978 renovation request: installation of service corridor to access septic tanks and storage. Claire's pulse ticked up. The corridor wasn't on the blueprint in Box C. Where would that corridor have been? She asked. The clerk shrugged. Depends how they built over it. A lot of those places bricked up old service ways, cheaper than maintaining them. That evening, Claire met Marcus at a bar on 6th Street. He was already nursing a beer, his jacket draped over the stool beside him. "You look like hell," he said as she slid into the booth. "Thanks." She ordered coffee. She needed clarity, not haze. "You've been at it all day?" She nodded. "I found something, a corridor, added in 78. Not on the later blueprints, could explain how they vanished." Marcus frowned. "You think they wandered into some maintenance tunnel and—" "What? Got trapped? Died in there?" "Not wandered," Claire said. "Led." Marcus whistled low. "That's a hell of a theory for 40 years after the fact." "Arthur Bell saw them leaving with a man in a truck," Claire reminded him. What if that was true, but the path wasn't through the front door? Marcus leaned back, skeptical but listening. "All right. So you think someone used that corridor to take them out the back? Why didn't detectives find it?" "Because by the time they searched, it might have been sealed." Marcus didn't answer immediately. He sipped his beer, eyes on the neon glow outside. "Claire, I get that this case has its hooks in you, but cold cases are graveyards. Sometimes they're cold because the answers don't exist." Claire stared at the coffee steaming between her hands. "Or because somebody buried them deep." The next day, she drove back to the diner ruins. The air smelled of wet concrete after last night's drizzle. She parked close, boots crunching glass as she moved toward the boarded entrance. Inside, it was dim and damp. Her flashlight beam swept over broken tiles and graffiti, names, curses, crude sketches of women. She walked straight to the hallway behind the booths. The restroom doors sagged open, revealing mildew-stained porcelain. At the end, the chain door waited. She rattled it gently. Rust flaked under her touch. Something about the far wall bothered her. She pressed her palm against it. Hollow. Claire crouched, running the light along the baseboards. There, faint outlines where plaster met brick, uneven compared to the rest. A seam, long painted over. She stood slowly, heart hammering. A sealed doorway. That night, she spread photographs of the wall across her table at home. She zoomed in on her phone, tracing the lines. The county records confirmed a corridor once existed. The wall in the diner confirmed it was bricked over. Why brick it up? Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Detective Ramirez? The voice was low, hoarse with age. Male. Yes. Who's this? You don't know me, but I know the Silver Star case. You need to stop digging. Claire's skin prickled. Who is this? You think you want the truth. You don't. Leave it cold. Let it stay buried. The line clicked dead. Claire sat frozen, the silence of her apartment pressing in. She replayed the voice in her head. Old, gravelly, and afraid. Not a crank call. A warning. Sleep didn't come. She sat by the window, city lights flickering beyond the blinds, and thought of Daniel Cross and Emily Hale. She imagined them alive, laughing over pancakes, then stepping into that hallway. Had they sensed it? The shift in the air, the wrongness in the silence? Or had they gone willingly, trusting the man who beckoned them into the dark? By dawn, Claire knew one thing. She couldn't stop. Whoever had bricked up that corridor hadn't buried just plaster and brick. They had buried the truth. And someone out there still wanted it hidden. Sleep was impossible. She sat at her table, staring at the Polaroid under the lamplight. The diner looked alive, like stepping into a time capsule. The blurred man's face was indistinct, but his posture, upright, squared shoulders, hands in pockets, spoke of confidence. She thought of Henry's words. One of ours. If someone had held onto this photo for decades, what else were they keeping, and why surface now? At 3:15 a.m., she finally pushed the Polaroid into an evidence sleeve, labeling it carefully. She sat back, the silence of her apartment pressing against her chest. Somewhere, the man in denim had lived another 40 years. He'd eaten, worked, aged, perhaps raised children, while Daniel and Emily's families had been left with nothing but empty chairs at holidays. The thought made her stomach turn. When dawn came, she wasn't sure if she was more afraid of what she would find, or of who already knew she was looking. Detective Claire Ramirez kept the Polaroid in her jacket pocket all morning, its stiff edges pressing against her ribs like a reminder. Someone else is in this with you. The bullpen was already buzzing when she walked in. Phones ringing, keyboards clacking, the low hum of voices trading updates. She went straight to Marcus's desk and dropped the photo in front of him. He squinted. Where'd this come from? My doorstep, last night. Marcus looked up sharply. Delivered? By who? She shook her head. Didn't see. Just 3 knocks in this. He studied the photo under the desk lamp. That's the diner. Silver Star. Taken the night they vanished, judging by the neon. Look here. She tapped the blurred figure at the frame's edge. Denim jacket. Watching. Just like Ruby's statement mentioned. Marcus leaned back, whistling low. So someone's been sitting on this for 40 years, and they decided to hand it to you. Why? Claire folded her arms. That's what I want to know. They brought the photo to the lab. The technician, a woman named Kendra, handled it with gloved hands. It's authentic, she said, after examining it under magnification. Film stock matches Polaroids from the early 80s. No signs of modern printing. This isn't a reproduction. It's original. Can you sharpen the man's face? Claire asked. Kendra gave a wry smile. We can try. But blur is blur. There's only so much detail to recover. You'll get posture, build, maybe approximate height if there's a reference point. Don't expect miracles. She slipped the Polaroid into her scanner. The image flickered on her screen, zoomed, adjusted. The neon glared white-hot, washing half the frame, but the man's outline held. Broad shoulders, straight stance, hair dark, parted. No features, Kendra said. But he's about 6 feet, give or take. Solid building, not some drifter. He looks placed. Placed? Marcus asked. Like he knew he was in the photo. Kendra said. "That's not a random blur." He's staring at the camera. Deliberate. Claire's chest tightened. The man had wanted to be seen. They left the lab with more questions than answers. By noon, Claire was pacing her office, the Polaroid secured in an evidence sleeve on her desk. Marcus sat across from her. "Let's assume the guy in denim is real. Say he was the one leading them out. Why leave evidence? Why not destroy the photo?" "Because sometimes people keep trophies," Claire said quietly. Marcus frowned. "You think he took it himself? A self-insert?" Claire shook her head. "Numbers somebody else took it. Somebody who wanted proof, maybe even leverage." Marcus leaned forward. "And now, after all this time, it lands on your doorstep. Which means, Claire finished. "Whoever had it wants this case open again." That evening, Claire returned to the diner ruins. She brought bolt cutters this time. The chained back door gave after 2 snaps, the metal clattering loud against the concrete floor. The hallway beyond smelled of mold and rust. She swept her flashlight across the wall where she'd found the seam. Up close, the plaster was cracked, paint flaking to reveal brick. She rapped her knuckles against it. Hollow. Her pulse climbed. She set her flashlight on the ground and pressed her fingers along the edges. The bricks had been laid hastily, mortar uneven, lines crooked. This wasn't city work. This was cover-up. Her radio crackled. Marcus's voice. "You sure you want to be in there alone? I need to see it." "Claire." But she clicked the radio off. She braced herself, then kicked hard against the lower section of the wall. Dust exploded in the beam of light. Again, harder. A brick shifted, then another. She pried with her hands until a hole gaped wide enough to peer inside. The smell hit first. Damp earth. Rust. Something older, sour beneath it. She shoved her flashlight through. The beam illuminated a narrow corridor lined with concrete blocks, ceiling low, pipes running along one side. A maintenance tunnel, just like the permit had said. Her heart hammered as she crawled through. The space was tight, walls sweating moisture. The light revealed scraps, rusted cans, an old boot sole, fragments of cardboard. Halfway down, her beam caught something else, metal glint. She crouched, brushing dirt aside. Her fingers closed around a thin, cold object. She pulled it free. A keychain, plastic rainbow charm. Her breath caught. The same charm from the photograph of the booth, the one dangling from Daniel Cross's car keys. But the keys had been left on the table, which meant this was a second set, or someone had taken them after. She sat on the cold concrete floor, the keychain trembling in her hand. The colors had faded, but the arc of the rainbow was still there. She pictured Daniel spinning them on his finger, Emily laughing. Claire slid the evidence into a bag. Her stomach churned. This corridor wasn't just a forgotten space. It had been used. When she finally crawled back out, the night air hit her like a wave. She sat on the diner's crumbling steps, the plastic rainbow heavy in her pocket. The photo, the call, the bricked wall, now the keys. Someone had left a trail in the dark. The question was whether they were leading her to answers, or into the same trap. The rainbow keychain sat in the middle of the evidence table, sealed in its bag, catching the fluorescent light like a relic. Detective Claire Ramirez hadn't slept. She'd gone from the diner ruin straight to the precinct, dropped the bag into intake, and signed it with a hand that trembled just enough to be noticed. Now she stared at it through the plastic. 40 years in the dark, and it had survived. Marcus arrived with 2 coffees, setting one beside her. "You look like death." "Thanks," she muttered. He studied the bagged keychain. "That's from the tunnel." Claire nodded. "Jesus," he sat down, rubbing his jaw. "That's not just a ghost story anymore." "No," Claire's voice was steady. "It never was." They brought the keychain to Kendra in the lab. She lifted it carefully with tweezers, eyes sharp behind her magnifiers. Plastic degraded but intact. Charm's cheap 80s injection mold. Keys are gone, just the ring and fob. She turned it under the light. See this? Claire leaned in. The metal ring was bent, warped in one spot. Pressure, Kendra said, like it was yanked hard, maybe torn off. Fingerprints? Marcus asked. Kendra shook her head. Not after 40 years underground, but... She paused, tilting the charm. There's residue here, white, flaky. Claire frowned. Paint? Kendra scraped delicately with a scalpel, collecting particles. Could be. I'll run composition. Might tie to location or tools used. Claire straightened slowly. Tools. Paint. Someone had handled these keys while sealing the corridor. Later, Claire stood at the evidence board in their office, pinning up the photograph of the booth, the Polaroid, and now a photo of the rainbow keychain. Marcus watched her. Okay, walk me through it. Couple goes to the diner, leaves their car keys on the table. Somehow, a second set ends up in the tunnel. Explain that. Claire paced. Possibility 1. Daniel had a spare set. He carried them into the corridor. They were torn away in a struggle, dropped, buried. Possibility 2. They never belonged to him at all, Claire said. They were planted. A message, Marcus groaned. By who? That's the question. She stared at the board. The man in denim looked back from the Polaroid, blurred but solid. That evening, Claire drove to Emily Hale's old neighborhood. The house was small, ranch style, with faded shutters and a sagging mailbox. Her mother still lived there. Margaret Hale, now in her 70s, answered the door with sharp eyes softened by grief. You're here about Emily, she said without being told. Yes, ma'am. Claire held out her badge. Detective Ramirez. May I come in? The house smelled of lavender and dust. Family photos lined the mantel. Weddings, children, graduations. Emily's framed photo sat alone, her smile frozen in another decade. Margaret poured tea and sat across from Claire at the kitchen table. Her hands shook only slightly as she set the cup down. I always knew someone would come back, she said. Every few years a reporter knocks, or a student writing a paper, but you're different. You found something. Claire hesitated, then nodded. We recovered an item near the diner, a keychain, with a rainbow charm. Do you recognize it? Margaret's eyes widened. She pressed her hand to her mouth. Yes, she whispered. Emily bought it at the fair, said it was silly, but she liked how bright it was. She put it on her spare keys. Claire's chest tightened. You're certain? Certain. Margaret's voice cracked. That was hers. Silence hung heavy. Finally, Margaret looked up. Does this mean she was there, in that place you found? Claire's throat felt dry. It means she didn't leave willingly. When Claire returned to her car, the evening sky was bruised purple, cicadas screaming in the trees. She sat gripping the steering wheel. Margaret's face burned into her mind. Emily had been real. She'd carried those keys. She'd laughed at the fair. And somehow, her charm had ended up in the dark of that corridor. The weight of it pressed against Claire until she could barely breathe. The next morning, Marcus tossed a folder onto her desk. You're not going to like this. Claire opened it. A lab report. The residue from the keychain. Lead-based paint. Discontinued in the mid-80s. Chemical signature matched industrial primer used in auto shops. Claire looked up slowly. Marcus's mouth was grim. Auto shops, like Henry Bell's place. The name thudded between them. Coincidence? Marcus asked. Claire shook her head. Not after 40 years. Somebody carried those keys out of that corridor. Somebody who touched cars, who worked with primer, and somebody who wanted me to find them. She tapped the Polaroid pinned to the board. The denim man blurred back at her, silent, patient. They're not just watching, she said softly. They're still here. That night, Claire couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on her. Even with her blinds drawn, her locks checked twice, the silence of her apartment felt like it carried breath. She sat with the Polaroid in her hand, the rainbow keychain beside her lamp. The couple had vanished in 1984. Their trail had ended in a sealed corridor. But the echoes hadn't faded. Someone wanted her to follow. The question that twisted in her gut was whether she was chasing the truth, or being led to join them. The garage smelled of burnt oil and acetone. Henry Bell wiped his hands on a rag as Claire and Marcus walked in, their footsteps echoing on the concrete floor. "You two again," Henry said flatly. "What now?" Claire held up the folder. "We ran composition on residue from an item we found. Lead-based primer. The kind used in auto shops. You worked at one." Henry's eyes hardened. "You're reaching." "Emily Hale's keychain," Claire pressed. "Found sealed in a maintenance corridor under the Silver Star. Covered in primer." For the first time, Henry's posture faltered. He looked away, rag twisting in his hands. "My brother saw something," he muttered. "I told you that." "Arthur saw them leaving with a man," Claire said. "One of yours. He was afraid to name him." "Was it you?" Henry slammed the rag onto the workbench. "Careful." Marcus stepped forward. "You're not doing yourself favors here. If you know something, say it now." Henry's jaw clenched. "Arthur used to talk too much. Got him in trouble plenty, but that night..." He wasn't lying. He did see something. He told me the man's name once. Claire's pulse ticked up. "Who?" Henry hesitated, eyes darting toward the open bay doors where the highway glimmered. "Doesn't matter. He's dead." "Tell us anyway." Silence, the hiss of a compressor somewhere in the back. Then Henry said, low, "Charlie Harker." The name meant nothing at first. Claire jotted it down, tested it on her tongue. Marcus frowned. "Who's that?" "Local," Henry said. "Mechanic, part-time tow work, always hanging around the diner late. Folks said he liked to help stranded drivers, but he was strange. Too friendly." Claire's mind flashed to the Polaroid. The blurred man, standing watch. "Where's he now?" she asked. Henry's gaze didn't waver. "Buried. Died 1991. Heart gave out." Marcus snorted. "Convenient." Henry leaned in. "Don't twist this. My brother tried to talk about him. People shut him down, said leave it alone. You know why?" "Why?" Claire asked. "Because Charlie wasn't working alone." That evening, Claire sat at her desk, running Charlie Harker through the system. Old arrest records blinked on her screen. Disorderly conduct, bar fights, unpaid tickets. Nothing heavy. His obituary surfaced in a scanned newspaper, a 2-paragraph notice tucked between classifieds. No wife, no children. Survived by a brother named Richard Harker, address listed in Bastrop. She leaned back, exhaling slowly. Richard, a thread still alive. The next day, Claire and Marcus drove out to Bastrop. The land grew flatter, scrubby, the sky wide. Richard Harker's property was a scatter of trailers and rusting equipment. Dogs barked as they pulled up, chains rattling. A man in his late 60s stepped out onto the porch, hat low, cigarette between his fingers. His eyes narrowed at the badges. "What do you want?" "Richard Harker?" Claire asked. "That's me. We're investigating the disappearance of Daniel Cross and Emily Hale. Your brother Charlie's name came up." Richard's mouth tightened. "Charlie's dead 30 years. Did he ever talk about the diner?" Claire asked. "About that night?" Richard flicked ash into the dirt. "People been trying to hang ghosts on him forever. My brother was no saint, but he didn't kill nobody." Marcus crossed his arms. "Then why did folks say he was involved?" Richard's gaze was cold. "Because Charlie liked to help people, and helping makes you visible. Visible gets you blamed." Claire stepped closer. "Where were you that night?" Richard smiled thinly. "I was with him." The words hung heavy. Claire studied him. His voice was steady, but his eyes glimmered with something else, not defiance, something closer to pride. You were both there? She pressed. Richard blew smoke toward the sky. We gave a ride to a couple, that's all. They needed help. Her chest tightened. You drove them where? Richard's smile widened, showing yellowed teeth. Not my story to tell. Marcus bristled. If you know something? Richard cut him off. You dig too deep, detective. You'll find more than you can bury again. Driving back, the silence was thick. Marcus finally muttered. He admitted it. As good as a confession. No, Claire said, staring at the highway. It was a performance. He wanted us to hear it, like bait. You think he's playing us? I think, she said quietly. The Harker brothers never worked alone, and the one who's still breathing wants us to know it. That night, Claire sat in her apartment, blinds drawn, the Polaroid in her hand again. She studied the blurred man in denim. Broad shoulders, squared stance. Could have been Charlie, could have been Richard, or someone else entirely. Her phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. It was a photograph. Her own car, parked outside her building, taken from across the street. No words. Claire froze. The case wasn't just reaching into the past anymore. It was reaching back. The photo on her phone still glowed when Claire placed it face down on the table. Her apartment was silent, but the silence no longer felt empty. It felt occupied. She locked her door, checked it twice, then called Marcus. They're watching me, she said, her voice low. Who? Don't know, but they sent me a picture. My car. From outside my building. Marcus swore softly. Text me the number, I'll run it. She did, then sat in the dark, waiting. 10 minutes later, Marcus called back. Burner phone, dead end. Claire pressed her hand to her forehead. They want me to know they're close. They want me rattled. And? She looked toward the blinds, the thin slats of shadow cutting across her wall. It's working. The next morning they returned to the diner site with a small team. The bricked corridor gnawed at Claire's mind. Unfinished, like a wound that hadn't been fully opened. The officers set up floodlights and portable fans to push out the stale air. Dust swirled as they hammered through the remaining wall until the corridor yawned open wide enough to move in comfortably. Claire led, flashlight steady. The air was damp, cold, smelling faintly of rot. The narrow tunnel ran maybe 40 feet before ending in a collapsed section of earth and stone. Piles of debris choked the far end. Collapse looks intentional, one of the officers muttered. Not natural. Claire crouched, sweeping her beam over the rubble. Dirt packed tight, bricks mixed in, like someone had sealed it twice, first the wall, then the collapse. Over here, Marcus called. He knelt by the left wall where something jutted from the earth. A curve of metal. They dug carefully with trowels. The dirt crumbled away, revealing the outline of a vehicle bumper, chrome dulled and flaking. Claire's breath caught. Looks like a car, Marcus said. Buried. An officer radioed for ground-penetrating radar. Within an hour, the screen confirmed it. A vehicle-sized mass entombed in soil at the corridor's end. Claire stood frozen, the beam of her flashlight trembling on the chrome. It wasn't just a tunnel, it was a grave. Excavation began the next day. Heavy equipment clawed at the dirt under floodlights as dusk bled into night. A crowd gathered at the tape line. Reporters, neighbors, curious strangers drawn by whispers of the Silver Star case resurrected. Claire watched as metal teeth scraped against something solid. With a groan, the earth gave way, revealing the roof of a car, rust eaten and crushed inward. 1980s make, an officer called. Two-door coupe. The digging slowed, becoming careful, deliberate. When they pried the driver's door open, a hollow clatter echoed from inside. Bones. A partial skeleton slumped against the wheel, skull tilted toward the roof, jaw gaping. Tatters of fabric clung to the seat springs. Gasps rippled through the team. Even the floodlights seemed to dim. Claire stepped closer, heart hammering. "Tag everything, photograph, preserve." Her voice was calm, but her stomach churned. The coroner leaned in, brushing soil from the bones. "Male, approximate age, mid-20s to 30s, been here decades." Marcus exhaled slowly. "Daniel Cross." Claire's eyes fixed on the remains. A man who'd left a diner booth one night and never returned. His journey had ended in this corridor, buried in silence while the world moved on. She whispered his name. "Daniel?" The discovery hit the news within hours. Body found in connection to Silver Star disappearance. Cameras flashed as evidence bags were carried to vans, the rainbow keychain already making headlines as the symbol of a lost generation. At the precinct, phones rang non-stop. Families of the missing called with desperate hope. Retired officers surfaced, claiming forgotten leads. Reporters hounded every step. Claire sat in her office, staring at the board. Daniel's photo looked back at her, young, smiling, unaware of the fate that awaited him underground. She'd found him. But Emily was still out there, and whoever had buried Daniel had lived long enough to send her a picture of her own car. At 2 a.m., Claire woke to pounding on her door. She grabbed her weapon, heart slamming, and checked the peephole. "Marcus." She opened it. His face was pale, eyes wide. "Got a call," he said. "Anonymous tip. They said if we want Emily Hale, we need to go back tonight." Claire's blood chilled. Back where? The diner. They drove in silence, the empty highway stretching like a dark river. Floodlights still glared at the site, though the crews had gone home. The tape fluttered in the night breeze. They ducked under. The corridor yawned open, silent, waiting. The tip had been specific. Look behind the passenger side of the buried car. They climbed down, beams cutting through dust. Claire reached the passenger door, brushed earth aside, and froze. A shoe. Leather, shriveled, fused to bone. Marcus knelt beside her, his light steady. Another skeleton. Smaller, curled against the seat frame, arms bent protectively across the ribs. A ring still clung to one finger, dull but unmistakable. Claire's throat closed. "Emily." The silence pressed down. 2 lives ended in the dark, sealed away, erased from memory, until now. She swallowed hard, voice breaking. "We found them." But as the silence stretched, she felt it. They hadn't just uncovered the dead. They had disturbed the living. A sound drifted through the night. Not the wind, not the creak of settling earth. Footsteps, above, on the diner floor. Slow, deliberate. Someone was here, watching. The footsteps above stopped as suddenly as they began. Claire and Marcus froze in the corridor, beams fixed on the skeletal remains in the car, ears straining. The silence returned, heavy, unbroken. Marcus whispered, "We're not alone." Claire nodded, every nerve sharpened. She clicked her radio. "Unit 4 at Silver Star, possible intruder on site. Quiet approach, no sirens." Static crackled, then the dispatcher's voice. "Copy." They waited in tense silence. Dust shifted down from the ceiling with a soft hiss. Finally, Marcus whispered, "We need to move." Claire's light swept once more over Emily's curled form, Daniel's slumped bones, the ring on Emily's finger dulled by soil. She swallowed. "We'll come back for them. But if someone's watching, we have to flush them out," Marcus finished. They climbed from the corridor into the diner's carcass. The air was thick with mildew and cold night. Their beams cut across overturned stools and cracked tile. Claire scanned every shadow. "Clear left." Marcus nodded. "Clear right." They advanced. The silence was suffocating until the faint scrape of metal came from the far end of the diner. Both turned. A door swung shut slowly, as if pushed by a retreating hand. They sprinted, guns up, but by the time they reached the door it hung loose, leading into the alley. Empty. Beyond, gravel crunched under fleeing feet, fading into darkness. Backup arrived minutes later. Officers swept the lot, combed nearby blocks, but found nothing. "Tracks here," one officer called, crouched by the fence line. "Boot prints." Fresh Claire's jaw tightened. "He was here." Marcus exhaled sharply. "Which means he knew exactly when we'd find them." Claire looked back at the diner, its windows black and hollow. "He's not just watching us, he's orchestrating this." The next morning, the coroner's office confirmed what they already suspected. Dental records matched. Daniel Cross and Emily Hale. The case file was officially reclassified. Homicide. Claire stared at the report in her office, her throat tight. The names she'd repeated in the quiet of her apartment, the faces she'd studied on fading photographs, now bones catalogued in evidence. She whispered to herself, "We found you." But the whisper felt unfinished. "We found you, but not him." The precinct swarmed with press. Microphones thrust over railings, cameras clicking, reporters shouting questions. "Detective Ramirez, do you believe the Harker family was involved? Why now, after 40 years? Is the killer still alive?" Claire pushed through without answering. Marcus trailed her, muttering, "They smell blood." In the conference room, Captain Morris slammed a folder on the table. "This case just went nuclear. The DA wants indictments, the mayor wants headlines, and the media wants a villain. We've got bones, a tunnel, and a photo. I need more." Claire's voice was steady. "We think the Harker brothers were involved. Henry's brother Arthur named Charlie decades ago. Richard as well." Morris's eyes narrowed. "Richard Harker. Still alive, still local. If he was there that night, bring him in." They found Richard at his trailer in Bastrop again, seated on the porch with the same cigarette, the same thin smile. Claire held up a warrant. "Richard Harker, you're coming with us." His laugh was low, humorless. "Took you long enough." In the interrogation room, Richard sat with arms folded, eyes calm. Marcus opened. "Daniel Cross and Emily Hale. Their bodies were found under the Silver Star. We know you and your brother Charlie were involved. You want to explain how they got there?" Richard tilted his head. "They asked for a ride. We gave it. That's all." Claire leaned forward. "Then why are they dead in a buried car?" Richard's eyes glimmered. "Because someone didn't want them walking out. And it wasn't me." "Who then?" He smiled, slow and cold. "There were more than two of us that night." The room fell quiet. Claire's pulse thudded. Richard's smile widened. "You're digging in dirt that's older than you, detective. Folks wanted that couple gone, and folks higher than you signed off." "Signed off?" Marcus snapped. "You're saying police covered this up?" Richard didn't blink. "I'm saying you should check your own files. Who signed off on closing it back in '85? Who said case cold and buried it? Not me. Not Charlie. Somebody else decided those kids weren't worth finding." Later, in her office, Claire pulled the original case closure report. The signature at the bottom glared up at her. Detective Frank Mallory. Marcus frowned. "Mallory retired 20 years ago. Lives out near the lake." Claire's voice was flat. "Then we asked him why he buried it." That night, Claire returned home to find another envelope under her door. Inside was a single sheet of paper. On it, a map, a circle drawn in red ink around the lake. Beneath, one word: truth. The lake was glassy that morning, still as a mirror, reflecting a pale gray sky. Claire drove along the winding road, pines crowding close, until a cabin appeared at the shoreline. The mailbox read Mallory. Frank Mallory had been the closer on the Cross-Hale file in 1985. Now, 40 years later, Claire needed to know why. She parked, gravel crunching under the tires. Marcus climbed out behind her. Together they walked up the sagging porch, where the scent of lake water mixed with wood smoke. The door opened before they knocked. Mallory stood there, A man in his 70s with a broad chest softened by age, white hair cut close. His eyes, sharp and pale, flicked between them. "You're Ramirez," he said. His voice was gravel, deep from years of cigarettes. "And you're the partner." "That's right," Marcus said. Mallory stepped aside. "Come in. If you're here, it means you dug where you shouldn't." The cabin was neat, almost military. Shelves lined with fishing tackle, old case files stacked in boxes, a single rifle mounted over the fireplace. Mallory gestured to the table. They sat. He poured coffee from a dented percolator, black and bitter. "You found them," he said flatly. Claire's throat tightened. Daniel Cross and Emily Hale, buried under the silver star. Mallory nodded, as if confirming something to himself. "Why was the case closed?" Claire asked. Mallory sipped, watching her over the rim of the mug. "Because the trail led somewhere no one wanted it to go." Marcus leaned forward. "Which was?" Mallory set his cup down with a soft thud. "The Harker brothers weren't the only ones there that night." Claire held his gaze. "We've heard that before. Richard Harker hinted at more people. Who else?" Mallory's jaw worked. His eyes strayed to the boxes in the corner. "Men with power, local business owners, politicians." The diner was a gathering spot for them. Not for food. For favors. Claire's skin prickled. Favors? Money laundering. Payoffs. The diner was a front. Daniel and Emily walked into something they weren't supposed to see. The silence was heavy. Outside, the lake lapped softly against the shore. Claire asked quietly, "What did they see?" Mallory's eyes were tired, haunted. A transfer, cash, drugs. The Harkers were muscle, but behind them were men with reach. Men who could make evidence vanish, witnesses shut up, and cops, like me, retire early if they ask too many questions. Marcus shook his head. "And you buried the case." Mallory's voice was low. "Because they told me to. I had a choice. Lose my badge, my pension, maybe more. Or close it and keep my family safe. I closed it." Claire's stomach knotted. "Who told you?" Mallory hesitated, then said a name. "Judge William Sutter." The name landed like a stone. Claire knew it. Sutter was a towering figure in Texas law, retired now, living like royalty on old money. His portrait still hung at the courthouse. "He's untouchable," Marcus muttered. Mallory's eyes were bleak. "Untouchable, then? Maybe not now." Claire leaned forward. "Why now, Mallory? Why leave me a map? Why the word truth?" For the first time, his face cracked. Fear flickered there. "I didn't," he said. Claire froze. "What do you mean?" "I didn't leave you anything," Mallory repeated, voice rough. "If you found a map, someone else put it there." The words sank in like ice. Claire remembered the envelope under her door. The map circled around this very lake. She glanced toward the window. The glass reflected the still water outside and the faint movement of pines. Someone had wanted her here. Marcus caught it too. His hand drifted toward his holster. "Detective," Mallory said quietly, "you're not safe here." A sound interrupted him. The crunch of gravel. Tires on the drive. All three turned toward the window. A dark sedan had pulled up behind Claire's car. Two figures stepped out. Claire's pulse thundered. Mallory moved fast for his age, pulling the rifle from above the fireplace. "Back room," he snapped. "Now!" But the knock came before they could move. Hard. Insistent. "Detective Ramirez," a man's voice called. Smooth. Confident. "We should talk." Claire froze. Marcus whispered, "They know your name." Mallory's grip tightened on the rifle. His face had gone pale. "They're not here to talk," he muttered. The second knock rattled the door. Then, silence. Claire's breath was shallow. She glanced at Marcus, then at Mallory, who was already setting his jaw, the rifle barrel angled toward the entry. The silence stretched. Then the window shattered. A canister clattered across the floor, hissing smoke. Mallory shouted, "Down!" The cabin filled with choking white fog as the door crashed open and dark shapes surged inside. The cabin erupted in smoke. Claire's lungs burned as she dropped low, vision reduced to milky haze. The acrid sting of tear gas clawed at her throat. She heard Marcus shouting, Mallory barking orders, the scrape of boots on wood. Then a figure loomed through the fog. Black mask, gloved hands, moving fast. Claire fired. The shot cracked, deafening in the enclosed space. The figure stumbled back with a grunt, slamming into the door frame before collapsing. Another shape lunged. Mallory's rifle roared, the blast rattling the windows. Wood splintered. The second intruder fell against the table, sending coffee mugs and papers crashing. "Out the back!" Mallory yelled. Marcus grabbed Claire's arm, dragging her toward the rear door. They stumbled through the smoke, coughing, eyes streaming. The back door burst open. Cold lake air rushed in, blessedly clean. They staggered outside, lungs heaving. "Keep moving," Mallory growled. "They'll circle." They ran along the shoreline, reeds whipping at their legs. Behind them, more shouts rose, muffled in the haze. Gunfire cracked. Bullets slapped the water around them, geysers of spray. Claire dove behind a fallen log. Marcus landed beside her, breath ragged. Mallory crouched nearby, rifle steady. "They won't stop," Mallory said grimly. "Not till we're dead." The lake stretched vast and black before them. The cabin was half lost in smoke, headlights cutting beams through the trees as more vehicles pulled up. "Options?" Marcus hissed. "Fight or swim," Mallory muttered. Claire's eyes darted over the shoreline. The dock jutted into the water, a fishing boat moored there. "The boat," she whispered. They sprinted. Shouts erupted behind them, gunfire spitting sparks off the dock planks. Claire hit the boat first, untying the rope with fumbling hands. Marcus shoved it off while Mallory clambered in, rifle raised. Engines roared behind them. Figures stormed the dock. Claire yanked the starter cord. The outboard sputtered, coughed, then caught. The boat surged forward. Bullets punched the water, whined past her ear. She hunched low, hands white-knuckled on the tiller. "Faster!" Mallory barked. The boat skimmed across the lake, leaving ripples glowing faintly in the moonlight. The dock receded, shouts fading. Only when the far shore loomed did Claire finally ease off, her chest aching with every breath. They pulled into a secluded cove, reeds tall around them. The motor cut, leaving only the sound of water lapping against wood. Mallory leaned on the rifle, sweat streaking his face. His hands trembled. "Those men," Marcus said, panting. "They weren't random. They knew your name, Claire. They came for you." She nodded, staring into the dark water. "Which means someone inside is feeding them information." Mallory's voice was hoarse. "Judge Sutter, his people. They've kept this quiet 40 years. They won't let you tear it open now." Claire turned to him. "Then we expose them." Mallory gave a bitter laugh. "Easier said than done." "You kept files," she pressed. "You saved something. Tell me you did." His eyes flicked toward the boxes in the cabin, now burning in her mind's eye. "Yes," he admitted. "But if they got them tonight?" Claire cut him off. "Then we go back. We get what's left." By dawn, the cabin smoldered. Fire crews doused the last of the smoke as Claire, Marcus, and Mallory stood beyond the tape. The structure was gutted. Roof collapsed inward. "Accelerant," the fire chief muttered. "Arson." Claire's jaw clenched. Whoever had come last night had returned to finish the job. "Files are gone," Mallory said, his voice hollow. But as they turned away, he pressed something into Claire's palm. A flash drive, blackened at the edges. "Not everything," he whispered. At the precinct, they plugged it in. Folders appeared, dated 1984 to 1986. Inside, photographs, transcripts, typed notes. Marcus scrolled. This is it. Mallory kept everything. Claire's eyes locked on one photo. Judge Sutter, younger, flanked by the Harker brothers outside the Silver Star. A handshake frozen in grainy black and white. She whispered, "Proof." Mallory's notes painted a darker picture. Cash drops, shipments, coded ledgers, names of deputies who looked the other way. And in the margins, written in his hand, "They'll kill me if I talk." Marcus sat back, exhaling. This blows the whole thing open. Claire's chest tightened. If we live long enough to use it? That night, Claire returned to her apartment. The blinds were still drawn, the air heavy. She set the flash drive on her desk like a relic. She should have felt triumph. Instead, she felt watched. Her phone buzzed. Another message. A photograph. Not of her car, not of the diner. This time, it was of Mallory. Taken that very morning, alive, breathing, with 3 words beneath it. Next time, him. The photograph of Mallory lingered on her phone long after the screen dimmed. Claire sat rigid at her desk, blinds shut tight, heart hammering in her ribs. Next time, him. The message was clear. The people behind Daniel and Emily's murder had no intention of letting a 70-year-old retired detective live to testify. Her first instinct was simple: protect him. But another thought, darker, more dangerous, tugged at her. If Mallory was their next target, he might also be their weakness. She hated herself for even thinking it. At dawn, she drove to his cabin. What remained of it? Fire crews had left, the ruins a blackened husk against the pale lake. Mallory sat on the hood of a borrowed pickup, a cigarette dangling from his lips, staring at the water. When she approached, he said without looking up, "They sent you the picture." Claire stiffened. "How did you—" "I know their methods. Always let you know who's next. Keeps you scared, keeps you predictable." "Then you should come into protective custody," she urged. He barked a dry laugh. Protective custody? With whose cops? Half the force looked the other way back then. You think they're clean now? Claire's chest tightened. He wasn't wrong. The conspiracy reached wide, and she didn't know who she could trust. "We've got your files," she said. "Your testimony could finish this." Mallory shook his head. "My testimony makes me a corpse. You want them? You need to draw them out. I'm the bait, and we both know it." Claire swallowed hard. "That's not what I want. It's what you'll have to do." Marcus was furious when she told him. "You're talking about dangling a 70-year-old man in front of hired killers and hoping we get there first," he snapped in the briefing room. "That's not a plan. That's a death wish." Claire met his glare. "And doing nothing gets him killed anyway. At least this way, maybe it ends." "You're letting them dictate the terms," Marcus shot back. "Then give me another option," she challenged. Silence. Finally, Marcus sagged back in his chair. "If we do this, we control the field. No surprises. Tight perimeter, eyes everywhere." Claire nodded. "Agreed. We set the stage, we make them believe he's alone, and when they come, we close the net." They chose the lake. Symbolic, exposed, but with angles they could cover. Mallory insisted on sitting out on the dock, fishing rod in hand. The picture of a stubborn old man refusing to be scared. Undercover units ringed the shoreline. Sharpshooters took positions in the tree line. Claire and Marcus waited in a van up the hill, screens glowing with live drone feeds. For 2 hours, nothing. Just the gentle ripple of the lake and the silhouette of Mallory on the dock, smoke curling from his cigarette. Then Marcus stiffened. "There!" On the screen, a ripple of movement at the tree line. 2 figures, black-clad, advancing low. Claire's pulse spiked. "Positions hold. Wait for my call." The figures crept closer, weapons glinting. On the dock, Mallory didn't move. He sat with the rod propped between his knees, eyes fixed on the water. "Closer," Claire whispered. "Closer." When the men stepped onto the dock, the wood creaked. One raised a pistol. Now! Claire barked. Spotlights blazed. Officers surged from cover. Shouts echoed. Drop your weapons! Police! The first intruder spun, firing wildly. Bullets snapped over the lake. Sharpshooters answered, precision cracks that dropped him instantly. The second bolted for the trees. Marcus was already out of the van, sprinting downhill. Claire followed. Branches whipped her face as she chased the fleeing figure. Ahead, Marcus tackled him to the ground. The man thrashed, but 3 officers closed in, wrenching the gun from his hands. Got him! Marcus panted, knee in the man's back. Claire crouched, yanking the mask free. The face beneath was young. Too young. Early 20s, eyes wild with adrenaline. Not a hardened hitman. A kid. Who sent you? She demanded. The boy's jaw trembled. He spat blood, muttering, orders. Whose orders? His eyes flicked past her toward the lake, toward Mallory. And then he smiled. Claire's stomach sank. She turned. On the dock, Mallory was still seated, fishing rod across his knees, but his chest was slumped forward. For a moment she thought he was simply weary. Then she saw the dark bloom spreading across his shirt. A sniper's shot. The scream tore from her throat before she could stop it. Officers scrambled, scanning tree lines. Sharpshooters called targets, but nothing showed. Whoever had pulled the trigger was gone, melted into the woods with military precision. Claire dropped beside Mallory, grabbing his shoulders. His breath rattled, shallow. Blood slicked her hands. Stay with me, she pleaded. You're not done, not yet. His eyes fluttered open, cloudy but still sharp enough to find hers. They'll bury it again, he rasped. Not if I stop them, she said, voice breaking. His lips curved in the faintest smile. Then the light in his eyes dimmed. The fishing rod slid from his lap, clattering against the dock. Claire's vision blurred with tears. Behind her, Marcus said quietly, We lost him. But inside, Claire heard Mallory's voice again. You want them? You need to draw them out. She looked down at her bloodied hands, then at the lake beyond. The war wasn't over. It had just become personal. The funeral was small. Mallory's coffin rested beneath the shade of an oak, the lake visible in the distance. A handful of family members stood in black. No uniformed honor guard. No brass. Just silence, broken only by the pastor's words. Claire kept to the edge. Marcus beside her. Neither spoke. They knew the truth. Mallory had died for something bigger than he ever confessed, and the people who killed him were still breathing. That night, Claire stared at the flash drive glowing on her desk. Mallory's files, the last tether to the past. Marcus leaned against the wall, arms folded. We've got evidence tying Sutter to the Harkers, photos, ledgers, but it's 40 years old. The DA won't risk it without a living witness. Claire rubbed her eyes. Then we make one. Marcus frowned. How? She looked up, determination hardening her features. We put Sutter in a corner, make him show his hand, record it, force the truth out of him. The plan was reckless, dangerous, maybe suicidal. But they had one edge. Sutter believed he'd erased everything. If Claire came to him with Mallory's files, he might break. They set the meet at the old courthouse. Symbolic, public but quiet at night. Claire walked in alone, wire beneath her jacket, recorder live. Marcus monitored from across the street, sniper cover unseen on rooftops. Sutter was waiting in the grand hall, beneath portraits of long-dead judges. He looked older than his photos. White hair, cane, but his eyes gleamed sharp as ever. Detective Ramirez, he drawled. You've been digging in graves that should have stayed shut. Claire's footsteps echoed as she approached. Daniel Cross, Emily Hale. Their bodies weren't graves. They were hidden. By you. Sutter's lips curled in disdain. Idealism. You think truth matters? 40 years, detective. The city prospered while those kids rotted. That's balance. That's sacrifice. Claire's voice was low, steady. You killed them to protect your empire. His laugh echoed, bitter. I never killed anyone. That's what men like the Harkers are for. Disposable dogs. And you, Claire pressed. Untouchable. His cane tapped the marble. I built this city. Judges, mayors, cops, all of them knew the price. You think a flash drive changes that? Claire stepped closer. Number, but your words do. For the first time, Sutter faltered. You're recording, he spat. She didn't blink. Every word. The sound of footsteps shattered the moment. Figures emerged from the shadows. 2, 3, 4 men in dark suits. Sutter smiled thinly. And even if you caught me, detective, you won't live to use it. Claire's pulse spiked. Her hand brushed her holster. Then gunfire split the air. Not from her. From above. Marcus's rifle barked, precise and deadly. One suit fell, then another. Chaos erupted in the hall. Claire dove behind a column, bullets ricocheting marble. Marcus's voice crackled in her earpiece. Move, Claire! Get Sutter out! Smoke, shouts, gunfire. It blurred into instinct. Claire surged forward, grabbing Sutter by the collar. He struggled, cane clattering. You'll never win, he roared. This city is mine. She dragged him across the floor, recorder still live, every word pouring into the wire. By the time the gunmen were down and sirens wailed outside, Sutter was in cuffs. The evidence wasn't just files now. It was his own voice, his arrogance, his confession. The DA would never bury that. At dawn, Claire stood on the courthouse steps, exhaustion etched deep. Reporters crowded below, flashes blinding. Marcus touched her shoulder. You did it, he said quietly. She shook her head. We started it. Mallory gave us the key. The rest, this city has to face. Her gaze lifted to the rising sun spilling over Austin. For the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope, thin, fragile, but real. But she also felt the weight of the lost. Daniel Cross, Emily Hale, Mallory. Justice at last had cracked the darkness, but it had cost blood to get there. That night, alone in her apartment, Claire replayed the recording. Sutter's voice filled the room. Sacrifice, balance, dogs to be used. She closed her eyes, whispered to the silence, we found you. And for the first time, it didn't feel unfinished. The Silver Star Diner was gone. Demolition crews had leveled it weeks after Sutter's arrest, leaving only a raw patch of earth at the edge of the highway. Where neon once glowed and booths held secrets, there was nothing but rubble and dust. Yet people still stopped there. Drivers pulled over to take pictures, whispering about the couple who had vanished one midnight in 1984. Some left flowers, others left letters folded under stones. The story had become part of the town's marrow. And now, finally, it had an ending. Daniel Cross and Emily Hale were laid to rest side by side in Oakwood Cemetery. Their graves were simple, white headstones, names etched in quiet dignity. At the service, their families wept, not just for loss, but for the decades stolen by silence. Claire stood apart, hands clasped in front of her. The air was warm, the trees heavy with cicadas. Marcus stood beside her, hat in hand. They deserved better, he said softly. They deserved truth, Claire replied. And for once, she felt she had given it to them. Mallory's grave lay not far away. No grand speeches, no headlines, just a weathered wooden cross hammered into the soil by his daughter, who whispered that her father had finally done the right thing in the end. Claire knelt there after the mourners had left, laying a single lily against the fresh earth. I wish you could have seen it, she murmured. We got him. Sutter's not untouchable anymore. The wind stirred, carrying the scent of pine and dust. She closed her eyes and let the silence answer. Weeks later, the story aired on national television. Reporters called it The Midnight Special. An unsolved disappearance, a buried car, a conspiracy spanning decades. The country watched, horrified, as Judge William Sutter was paraded in cuffs, his voice replayed for the world. Sacrifice, balance, dogs to be used. The truth could no longer be buried, but truth never comes clean. It leaves scars. One evening, Claire drove back to the lake. The cabin was gone, burned to its bones, but the water still lay quiet under the fading sky. She sat on the dock, legs dangling, the memory of Mallory's fishing rod vivid in her mind. For a long time she said nothing. Then she whispered, almost like a prayer, for Daniel, for Emily, for every voice they tried to silence. The lake gave no reply, only a ripple of silver under the setting sun. But Claire felt something loosen inside her chest. Not peace, not yet, but the first step toward it. She rose, walked back to her car, and drove into the night, leaving the lake behind, but carrying its silence with her. And the legend of the couple who vanished from the diner, the midnight special, would never vanish again.